Okay, so now we're going to move on to our speaker session, which every month we do one presentation, and then we also do an interview where we try to go beyond just the technical aspect of what people are talking about in code and trying to discuss a little bit more behind the scenes. I've actually named it this afternoon. I came up with a name for it, which is Beyond the Code. So what we're going to do is we have our guest here, Kevin Molcard, who is the VP of software. No, you're the director now of
Yeah, director of software development.
Yeah, at Arturia. Welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so it's great to have you here, and I think that a great place for us to start would maybe to talk about a little bit about who you are, how you got into audio, and how long you've been in Arturia.
Yeah, I have always been passionate about music, and when I was a teenager, I started to make music with my friend and to make computer music. So I started in the end of the 90s, playing with the first version of Ableton Live, Fruity Loops, stuff like that, and making techno music with my friends. And then after the high school, I wanted to become a sound engineer. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to go to the sound engineering schools because I haven't that much experience in sound recording and things like that. But I was good at math, and so I talked to a bunch of people, and I said, okay, I like to play and to make music with this kind of software. Why not trying to become a software programmer and making this kind of software? It would be a great things to do.
Yeah.
And so I did I went to the university and do a computer classroom, and I went up to the master's degree. And then I looked at a very famous website in France called Audiofanzine, which is a place where all people passionate about music can look at, and you have all the companies and all the product available. And I took all the companies that were doing software at the moment, and I sent my resume and applied for my last year of internship. And fortunately for me, Arturia answered to me, and I come up at the company as an intern.
What year was this?
Sorry?
What year did you join as an intern?
Sorry? Again?
What year did you start at Arturia?
I started to work on the Origin project, which was the first Arturia hardware synthesizer. It was back in the 2002 and 7. And yeah, I started as an intern working on the software, on the updates of the firmware of the hardware, and also the software that manage the presets, so you can send back from the computer to the hardware the presets. I worked on that for maybe 2 or 3 years. Then I started to work on the Spark project, which was a drum machine, a hybrid drum machine, a software and a dedicated controller, yes, to do a drum machine. So I was involved in the software development of that. I did most of the software architecture and all the sequencing, pretty much everything about the audio DSP from the software. And then at that moment, I started also to manage the project because this project was quite a bit long. It took, I worked on that for maybe four to 6 years because there was first a first hardware controller called Spark, and then we worked on a second smaller hardware controller called Spark LE. And Spark software went up to version 2. So yes, it took me about 5-6 years working on that.
Wow.
At the end, I was also managing the whole project.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I grew up like this.
Yeah.
And then I started to work on the V Collection project. It was maybe some 8 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
something like that, on the V Collection 4. And yeah, so I was both developing and managing the project. And then the company continued to grow, and the team I was managing continued to grow, and step by step, version after version. So yes, version 5, 6, 7. Today we are proudly releasing the 8th version of the V Collection.
Yeah.
So it's a long journey.
Yeah. And you must.
Sorry.
I was going to say you must have seen a lot of changes because you joined Arturia.
Yeah, definitely. When I come at Arturia, we were about 15 people.
Wow.
And and now the company is about a bit more than 100 people.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
And the one thing I was thinking about was how much the landscape of plugin and audio development has changed a lot over the past 20 years. You have a lot more independent developers. You have a lot more people who are releasing plugins. Probably early on, I imagine that you didn't have a whole lot of competition.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. At the beginning, we were among the first working on software instruments. There was not that much at that time. There was, of course, Native Instrument. Timur's know it a bit, and and there was Steinberg, Waves, of course. Yes.
GeForce.
Yeah, GeForce. Yeah, there was some history about GeForce and Arturia. I won't comment that because I wasn't there at that time. And now, yes, the landscape is much larger, but I think that's very good to have so many actors, so many competition, and it forces us to even reinvent and think about what we have to do and not falling asleep and just yes. So
yeah, one thing that we think about with companies that have been active for so long is working with these larger legacy code bases, and you don't have to deal with like a big DAW like Ableton does that has probably a code base that spans over 20 years. But in your products, I imagine that you have code bases that are quite old. And how do you handle that? How do you deal with that?
It's a nightmare, as you can imagine. We try to along the years to fix that by constantly removing some old code and replacing it with some new code. What we started, I think it was 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. We started to work on having all the same code base, at least for the what is not the audio engine, but everything else to have the same code base for all the software. Because at that time we were having maybe 3 different graphical frameworks at that time. For the Jupyter 8, the first version, we were starting working on Juice, but before we were working on VST GUI, and we also had some old code base on Carbon stuff for macOS and some specific Windows stuff on MFC, and it was, yes, a nightmare. So we decided to get rid from all of that and put everything on Juice, and we developed our own framework on top of Juice to have more flexibility, on the widget and things like that. So what we are using for Juice is mainly the component system for the graphical rendering and all the user events, keyboards, mouse handling, things like that. Mm-hmm. And yes, for everything else, we have developed our own custom widgets, and we also we started to not use it was also a long time ago, but starting to use more standard libraries code rather than Juice code, for instance, for the strings, the files, things like that. Mm-hmm. Thanks to modern C++, it's much more easier to have that. I know that in the meantime, Juice is becoming much more standard compliant on all the containers and things like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's what we've done. It was a lot of work. It has been released I think on the V Collection 5. So at that time, it was much more comfortable to maintain and develop new products. But we still had legacy code for the DSP stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's why from now we are starting also to get rid of that, because it's most of this code have been written by people that are not anymore in the company. There is not that much documentation and things like that. So we have developed our own DSP framework, and all the new products are developed using this DSP framework. And for instance, we have released just today a new update of the Jupyter 8, which is completely rewritten from scratch on the DSP level code.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I imagine when you're dealing with that older code base as well, that it must be tough to introduce new staff into your company, because they may be used to maybe working with Juice as a framework and used to the way that it's working, and then now they're coming into an environment where there's a lot of legacy code that may be working with a completely different paradigm that might not even have the same, might not even have great documentation for it. So there must be a big question of, how much time do you allocate towards updating the code versus working on new products? And
exactly, yeah, that's a big deal. And yes, we are at a step where we think now it's the time to get rid of this legacy code. So it will take lots of time, because we cannot do it for all the product at the same time, of course. So I think in the upcoming years, we'll continue to update maybe one or twice or two, maybe three if we are lucky, products per year, and continue to develop also new products, because that's you have all these user base, all the V Collection user that love these scenes and that want them to be upgraded, updated, and up to the standards of 2020, and not the standards of the 20s or the 2010s. But on the other hand, only putting the resources on updating existing stuff is not, it cannot work on a financial basis.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to balance that, of course.
Yeah. So you started as a software engineer, and then as time moved on, you moved more and more into management. And one question that I have was, how do you do any coding now, or are your responsibilities mainly management now? How do you miss coding?
To be honest, no, I don't code anymore. I still can have a look at some code bases, and especially for the very old code base, which I am the one, even if I didn't work on this code base, since I'm the oldest guy in the software team, I know more than the other these code bases because I worked on them, and and even today we've had, before the release, a new bug coming from on the modular V, and this is one of the instruments which has the oldest code base in the V collection.
Yeah.
And yes, we've looked at that, and we found a bug. I looked at it, and I helped the team to fix it, and it was, just a fucking array overflow, and but because it was written using old C array things that are not, and it was not catched by our unit test and shit like that. And this was a bug that we knew it was here because we've seen it a couple of times in the last years, but it was very, very difficult to track it because we were not able to reproduce it on a regular basis. And for some reason, with the latest version, it was highly reproducible on a particular presets. And so we fixed it in a couple of hours, but that's also why we want to get rid of this old code base that is not easy at all to maintain. And yeah, so I'm not coding new feature, of course, and it's true that I'm missing it. But I'm also enjoying a lot the managing stuff. It's, of course, completely different. It's more human interaction with the team, and trying to know the people very well, and to fit their strengths with what is key for the company. Mm-hmm. That's really how I like to work, to make sure the people are really enjoying and liking what they are working on, and it's working well so far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how big is your team?
The software team is about 12, 13 people. There is the DSP team, which is about, I think now, 8 people. They have a dedicated manager, but I'm still managing the both team. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the software in itself is around 20 people.
Wow. One question that I have that I think about a lot, because I work with quite a few companies, helping them recruit for roles and things like that. And a lot of companies, they really only hire for kind of senior or very experienced developers. Mm-hmm. And there's this challenge where things seem to be very kind of top heavy in terms of the hiring. At Arturia, how do you handle bringing junior developers on board? What are some of the things that how can I guess my question is, how do you keep yourself from falling into a trap where you say, I only want the most experienced developers?
To be honest, at Arturia, we have a pretty young team. We hire a lot of people after their internship from school,
Mm-hmm.
And it works quite well. You have to balance it with more experienced developers, but we are not that much in the trap to trying to get the most experienced developer. We are giving their chance to the newcomers, and yes, as I was when I started at Arturia, and yeah, I think, for instance, in the software team, I think most of the people are between 20 and 30.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of very experienced guys, which are helping the younger to grow.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's the more experienced people can also be a bit more difficult to manage and to it depends,
because they're kind of set in their ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sure. How do you actually hire for your so you have somebody that is just coming out of university, maybe they know a little bit of Juice, maybe maybe they've done plugins. How do you spot a person that you feel is right for Arturia? What is it that you look for?
That's a good question. I think being passionate in music, and especially in computer music, is a very good point to be hired, but it's not required. And there are a lot of guys that were not at the beginning, knowing computer music and things like that, and that came to it with us. So it's I think it's a trade-off between that and being curious, open-minded, and of course very skilled in C++. I would say that's the first thing. You have to know your C++. And
when you say know your C++, what does that mean to you? What would you say is like the bottom level when you're hiring a junior developer and you say you need to know C++? What are some things that you would need about that?
It's maybe I went it a bit too fast. Maybe it's not your C++, but it's more how you reason about code, and how you are also open-minded to discussion and feedback about your code. And if you are able to really understand easily what the code is doing, what is missing from it, and what could be the improvement on it, I would say that these are the most important skills I'm looking at.
So it's how you attack problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's not, it's not knowing all the different sorting algorithm or thing like that. This is not needed for us.
Mm-hmm.
At least on the software department. On the DSP side, they are much more demanding on the the hard skills, the mathematics and things like that. But on the software departments, we are more yes on the understanding of how a program works. How you can manage your memory and what are the consequences when you have multi-threaded applications, things like that.
Yeah, because it's interesting to me because a lot of the things that you seem to mention seem to be things that are away from coding in a way, things like discussion and problem solving and that. So it seems like the actual raw coding skills are part of the equation, but not the whole thing. So are there other things such as the persons, how they integrate into the team? How do you work with that? How do you kind of calculate?
Yeah, I think what I really think is important, and that's something I was thinking a lot for myself, for what I learned from my university school. I felt when I arrived at Arturia that my school didn't give me that much, hard skills in computer programming and in how a computer works inside, things like that, compared to other people from other schools. But what my school gave me was the ability to learn and to learn quickly, and that's what I think is important. It's because if your brain is well connected, I would say, even if you do not know at the moment, how to code a lambda with this algorithm in C++ 11 or C++ 14, you can learn it, and that's for me the most important thing.
Yeah,
because your knowledge at the moment, at a given time, will be outdated in a couple of years or even in 1 year, depending on what you are working on. So it's better that you know that you have to learn and that you will have to learn continuously during your career, and that's also better for you and for your wellness to continue to learn and to not fall in all the same thing and
random.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, shifting gears a bit. So, of course, Arturia. When I think Arturia, I think analog emulations of synthesizers. And one question that people ask about all the time is about analog modeling. How do you model something after an old piece of gear? I know that you probably, or you might not be able to really tell us like the inner workings of how you do that. I'm wondering if you could maybe give us a little peek into how you approach that.
I would say there is no magic. First, you need to get the unit. You need to, if you can, you need to get the schematics of the electronics. You need a very good knowledge in electronics engineering, and a very good knowledge also in discretizing things, and then it's if you have access to the schematics, you put these into equations, and then you run it, for instance, you start with Splice, LTSpice, thing like that, software, and then you put it in code, and you compare, and you have to measure on the hardware, and you compare your result with the measurement you've made, and usually you are close, but not close enough to what you wanted to get, and then it's yes, we have the we are lucky at Arturia because we have some very skilled people in electronic engineering for all the hardware synthesizer we are doing. So they are helping our DSP team a lot to better understanding what could be the problem in their modeling, because they are not taking into account, for instance, the ground coming in the electronics that could making some spikes in the
CPU.
Yeah, not in the CPU, in the frequencies, for instance, in 50 hertz frequency or thing like that. And then it's once you have a model you like, then you have to make some compromise in terms of CPU optimization and things like that, because the component level modeling is very, very CPU hungry, and if you want to have several voices of polyphony, you have to do some compromise. So you have to simplify the models where you think it can be simplified, and keep the very best modelization where you think it's very, very, very important.
Amazing. Yeah. And how much has computing power really helped with that, with the need for simplification? Yeah,
a lot. It's yeah, of course, it's a lot. But at some point we had I think it's in the early 2010s where the processors start to become more with several cores rather than increasing the frequency. It starts to be a problem for us because we are always running on one CPU thread, and so the processing, the increase in processing power were not that much helping for us. But it's still very good. I mean, even even if the processor are not getting higher CPU frequency, it's still crazy the amount of computation you can do with CPU nowadays. It's
yeah.
Can I ask a quick question, Josh?
Yeah, of course.
I'm just wondering, are you saying then that you don't do threading inside of the audio thread? You don't use multiple threads when you the audio?
At Arturia, not that much. A bit. It depends on not in all instrument, and we are working on that to make it possible in every instrument. But at the moment, it's not. Yeah. It's a bit complicated also, because if all the we are working, our software are run in DAW, and it can also conflict if several software are using multiple cores at the same time. So it's a trade-off, I would say. But I think this is still the way to go, given the new new computer coming from the for instance, Apple with the new M1 and things like that. But yeah, I still don't think it's a good way to go to have all the VST plugin manufacturer making multi-core processing without knowing what are doing the other plugins.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember, I think it was maybe in 2010 or something like that, when Steinberg was presenting VST3 at Music Messe, and there was these guys from UI, which were asking why they didn't had multi-thread processing in the VST3 SDK. And at that time, I was already thinking it was a very good idea, and I still don't understand why there is no move in that way in the plugin development. But if we start to talk about plugin format and things like that, I think we can talk about the whole night on that topic. So
amazing. So one thing that I thought about was about how Arturia is so known for analog vintage synthesizers, but then you came out a couple of years ago with Pigments, which is a whole new type of synthesizer. One question that I have was, how do you, when you're creating something that isn't modeling analog gear, how do you make a synth unique? How do you make it sound unique? Because people start off with your typical waveforms, sine wave and saw wave, square wave. What are some things that you do to try to get a unique sound out of a synthesizer?
That's a very good question. I think with Pigment we started on a blank page, so it was a very good opportunity, but it was also very scary because you can do whatever you want. And I think what makes Pigments unique is it's not that much in the sound. It's more all the integration of what we try to make the workflow of the software very easy to grasp, and also it's the combination of the different feature, what you can modulate and what you cannot, and what you can access directly from a knob or with more clicks and things like that. I think it really defines how the instrument will sound also at the end. What feature you decided to add and what feature you decided to not add, and yeah, I think that's very hit for Pigments. So yeah, for sure, when we started to work on that project, we wanted to make our very own synths, but yeah, it was not that much we didn't want to make it have a particular sound. We wanted to make it as versatile as possible also.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow. And one of the things that struck me about it was the graphics aspect of it. Was that with OpenGL or
yeah, it's Not of it's a combination of OpenGL rendering and standard juice rendering.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. And as you were saying before, you have you have a new release today. Can you tell us a little bit about your
Yeah, so we released the version 8 of V Collection. So it contains lots of new software. So there is a vocoder. So this one is very particular for us because this is our first instrument where there is a mic input where people can really sing in, and very particular, and it's very, very funny because you can also put your own sample in it, so you can play it just like a synth. So if you want it, there is an emulator too. So this one is very funny, and the characteristic is very on the factory library, which replicating the famous sound of the emulators, and but there are some very, very nice feature in it. It's surprisingly very powerful, despite the original instrument was not that. No, it was one of the first samplers at that time, but yeah, compared to other synths from the same era, the sonic palettes, yes, it's mainly on the possibility to sample, and so you have some sounds that are not less synthetic, I would say. Then there is an emulation of Juno called the June 6V. So this one is, we wanted to have a synth that is less intimidating and easier to start with, when you do not know that much in synthesis. So this one is very oriented to that because it does not have that much parameters and feature, and it's still very powerful, and the sound is very fat. And then we have the OBXA, which was previously released but was not included in the V collection. We have a very big update, as I told you, on the Jup 8V, which we completely rewrote the DSP code from scratch. So it's I really engage people who knew the first one to compare, and you see that the state of the art in DSP modeling has changed compared to what was possible in 2007, the date of the first release of the Jupiter 8V. Amazing. And there is, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, there is there is an update of the stage 73. So we've updated the physical modeling engine, so it's much better. We have a very big update on Analog Lab V, which Analog Lab is the combination of all the presets and the audio engine of the whole V collection. So in it, you can have access to all the sounds from the V collection. And we completely redesigned the interface and the workflow. So again, I invite everybody to try it. It's very, very nice to use when you are just looking for sound and not that much into creating your own presets and sound design. It's very, very nice. And yes, we also completely redesigned the sound browser for all the existing instruments. And we've added a new dedicated side panel with some features like in-app tutorial, so you can learn how to play with the instrument and how to sound design with it for all the instruments.
Wow. That sounds like a big That sounds like a huge project.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think this was one of the biggest one we did since I'm managing the project. So yeah, as I told you, I'm managing the V collection since version 4. So it's yeah, I would say maybe between 6 to 8 years. So yeah, and on that one, yeah, is internally it's I would say it's around 30 people working on it, and with all the external sound designers and things like that, I think it's more than 50 people working on the project. And on the last year, yeah, it's we are very proud and happy to finally make it public. And yeah.
Yeah, congratulations. How long does that, I'm curious how long that cycle takes, if you could tell us, like, where do you start, where you say, okay, we're going to do this? I mean, are we talking
yeah, I think
year, 2 years?
It's we are on a cycle. On the V collection, we are on a cycle to every 18 months, we release a big update of the V collection. So once V collection 7 was released 18 months ago, we started to work on the V collection 8. But first, it's looking for and defining what would be the next instrument. So it's always complicated. We need to find what would be interesting and to discuss this. What is feasible? What are the team available or not? What are the skills required? And then once we know that, it takes I would say between 6 to 8 months, and then we start the project. First, we start with the modeling, of course.
Were you going to say something else?
Yeah, and this takes it really depends, but it takes up to 1 year to model the instrument.
Yeah.
And once we start to have a good model, we start to also to work on the software. Thanks to our internal framework, it's now easier and easier to make prototypes, and so to test what is doing the DSP we've put in it, and we put into our QA department to do some testing during the development. And then once we think we are good in terms of modeling, we start to work on the presets. It's always a tricky part because if you start too early, you can find issues that can change the sound of the preset. So it will require the sound designer to redo the preset. But if you start it too late, you won't have enough time to do the proper sound design. So it's always complicated.
Wow. And
when you have 4 instruments in parallel, plus a complete redesign of the, for instance, on the browser, the preset browser, we have changed the preset types and styles and how the tags are managed. So we had to retag and all the existing presets. So it's yeah.
It's a big project.
It's lots of things to manage in parallel.
Great. I have one more question, and then I think we could turn it over to the audience for their questions. Yeah. Where do you feel that plugin development is going? So, of course, you see that with Apple, there seems to be this move towards taking the mobile ecosystem and maybe merging it or mixing it with the desktop. What we're doing on the desktop. Where do you see plugin development heading in the future in terms of what do you see?
That's a good question. On the mobile thing, it's very complicated, because there are the tech companies who want to go somewhere, but there is also the market and the people, and we cannot force people to go wherever we want to. And the mobile platforms are here for maybe, I don't know, but it's almost 10 years now that we have the iPad and things like that. And at the beginning, we all thought it was the future, but now 10 years after, it's a bit there, but it's not where the majority of the market is. So where it will come, that's a good question. It's I think it's a very mature market, the plugin, and I really would like to see some breaking new technology that make things change, but it's it's very difficult to make this kind of move. Take for instance the MIDI. The MIDI is here for 40 years now, and we now have the MIDI 2.0 coming finally. How much time will take the manufacturer to really embrace it? And that's a good question. I don't know. But I really would like, because we are all fighting with all this retro compatibility. For instance, VST2 is, we are still forced to support it because of some companies, some important companies are still on it. It's changing. Maybe in a couple of years we'll be able to remove VST2 support, but it's not yet there. So I won't be too much, I won't do some hypothesis that things will change a lot in the coming years. I see more in the hardware and software integration, and maybe some some products that are more hybrid and let the user play with or without the computer, thing like that. Because it's now easier and easier to have embedded platform that can run software that were designed for the computer. You can look at your Akai with the Force and the APC, now Native Instruments with the Machine Plus. I think this is more what things will come in the future.
Yeah. I do have one more question before we move to audience questions. What are your thoughts on, of course, there are new audio development technologies like Soul and other languages that are trying to lower the barrier for audio programming, and what do you think it would take in order for a company like Arturia to really take a serious look at these other languages, these other workflows, and say, okay, this could save us a lot of time, a lot of heartache with C++, or do you feel that you're stuck, or do you feel that you're kind of married to C++ now?
Yeah, it's a bit like the assembly, then the C, then the C++, and now our embedded guys are starting to get more and more into C++. I don't think there is any more people at Arturia doing C. But going to even more modern languages like the Soul is very, very interested. But when it came up, I thought, if a very, very big company, like Apple or Google or Microsoft is supporting it, and it's available in their platform, I think I thought it would be more adopted, like the CUDA, for instance, in the graphic platform. But for smaller company, like even the bigger company in the music industry, we are still in a niche market, and it's very, very difficult for a new language to come and to be a de facto standard. So
yeah. Do you think it's because of the knowledge base of your existing software team, or do you think that it would just be the time that it would take to adopt it, or do you think that there are things that are missing from the language that you would need to see?
I think it's more on, especially for things toward embedded platform, it's more on the industrial and the risk that, the long-term maintainability of the thing.
Yeah. What about Rust? What are your thoughts on Rust?
I really would like to have my team working on Rust. I think it's technically speaking, it's great. And I will try to push my team to work on it, but it's very difficult to make the jump once you know your tools. I think it's related to what I told you about learning things. For the people, for the single people, it's very interesting to learn these new languages and things like that. But for a company, it's a much more difficult step to change these kind of things.
Yeah. Great. I think we're ready to move to audience questions. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, we do have a few audience questions. I would say quite a few of them are kind of about something that you discussed earlier, like kind of getting a job, hiring, this kind of stuff. So maybe I'll just ask those first. So Lisamax80 is asking how to get experience to get a job in audio programming. I think this is an interesting question, because you said earlier you were actually hiring a lot of people who just come out of school.
Yeah.
But or maybe you have like relatively junior people. But I'm actually wondering this as well. Like, what would you tell someone? How would they even acquire the skills to get a job like that? Like, what would you recommend?
I would say first, it's if you are passionate with that, I think Juice is a very, very good framework for that, because you can learn a lot of things with it, and from all the aspects of audio plugin development. I mean, you have the DSP, you have all the graphic managing things, and you have all the problems, related to multi-threaded and things like that. So I think I would say start to work with Juice. It's the best thing to start with, and then look at the resources. If you like to make this kind of things, look at the resources on the internet, like the musicdsp.org, and try to really take the end on it, and then make your own projects. I think when you receive a resume, if you see that you have a girl or a guy that is doing some open source project, even if it's not a big things, but just some small things, it's always better to sell you to the recruiter, I would say.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. I think that's really good advice. There's a couple other questions around this kind of area. So John Rupsch is asking, I know your role is in software development, and I'm really interested in DSP jobs. Is there someone at Arturia that would be best to ask questions about DSP-specific roles?
Yeah, definitely. If you want to, I won't be able to give you on public his email address, but if you drop me a message, or maybe we can find a way to. I think we'll be happy to give you some insight on it, definitely. And it's kind of funny. I remember maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I received an email of a young guy, a young student. I didn't even know how he got my email address, but he asked me just that question: what should I learn to come to work at Arturia? And I answered him. So I gave him pretty much the same advices I told you. So he did that, and a couple, and I also gave him a couple of universities and schools that I know are good for learning that. And a couple of years after that, he applied as an intern at Arturia, and he get hired, and at the end he finished being hired at the company.
Wow, great. So you're saying that a lot of it is about determination.
Definitely is that.
Yeah, that's what I've seen. Now we know thousands of audio developers, and it seems that right away I can tell the ones that are going to get hired, that are going to be successful in the career field, just from the sheer determination and the work ethic, and like you were saying, the curiosity. I think people underestimate that so much.
Yeah, and it's also that this is kind of more important than like experience, right? You can have never worked on like a piece of real audio software before, but if you know how to program, if you have like an understanding of like roughly how stuff work, you can like dig in and figure it out. And
just try it. Just try it.
Yeah,
try it, and you will have a lot of fun. I mean, it's crazy when you start to do audio programming and you have your first piece of code working. It's such a pleasure to get this, and I mean, I think we are all the same. When we see young people passionate, and we all want to help them, and giving them advices, and so yes, the advice I would tell them is just don't hesitate to contact us, and I think you can find me on the internet somewhere in different forums and things like that. And if you ask me directly, I will answer you and give you advices. So, and I don't think I'm alone on that. There are lots of people like me in this industry.
Yeah.
Right. So very related to that, Jackson Abel asking whether you currently have internships in engineering.
Yes, it's in. We have done, because there is some kind of season in internships, and so it will start in early next year. We have done pretty much all our recruitment for the period of February to the summer. But again, if you are motivated and interested, don't hesitate to drop an email at jobs@arturia.com, and we'll still look at it, and even if it's not that year, maybe it will be next year.
So there is a question by Elliot Bernard asking, what is actually your educational background?
My educational background. So yes, as I said, I went to university in. So I started with I graduated in computer science, and then I went in master's again in the university, master's degree in Bordeaux, University of Bordeaux. There is a specialty in audio and image processing. But again, it was so I have a very generic background, and the audio and image processing was only in the very last year of my student. So
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we have a few more questions. So Michael Kaufman is asking, actually somewhat related to the educational topic. So at university, we learn a lot about software development process, analysis, design, etc. But in real life, how do you do this at Arturia? And I've heard that people, for example, rarely use UML these days.
So it's.
I guess the question would be how far removed is what you learn at university about like building software from what's actually going on at a place like Arturia?
Yeah, it's true. It's true that we are not using UML as much as what we should, I would say. But I think it's good to learn that, because it helps you to reason about a program and to think about what are the what are the aim of each individual part of your program, and to not couple that much the things, and to really the separation of consenting and all that. I think that's why it's important to learn that, even if it's true that when you are at your day-to-day job, you are not that much doing UML, even if it's still very, very important to try to document as much as possible what you're doing.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So John Day is asking, can AI be a tool to emulate analog sounds? So I'm shifting gears a bit. We have a couple questions about analog modeling and analog sounds. What do you think about AI in that context?
It can definitely help. At the moment at Arturia, we do not have running code in the software that are using AI to model stuff, but we have some tools, some in-house tools that using AI to help us model stuff. And I think in the upcoming years, it will continue to be more and more used.
Wow.
In all the aspects, even not only modeling, electronic modeling.
Cool. So that's really interesting. Looking forward to like that, becoming more widespread, because I think it's a technology that a lot of people kind of have maybe heard of, but I think in traditional plugin development isn't necessarily mainstream yet, but I'm definitely really looking forward to that.
Yeah, but there are more and more companies using it and marketing it, and very important company like Isotope, or even recently Native Instruments had this AI stuff on the guitar rig. So, and it's I know that there are more and more people, more and more research field. If you look at the DiFix stuff, there are more and more papers related to that. AESM, so it will continue to grow, and I think you were asking what will come in the future. I think definitely this is coming, and this will continue to grow in the coming years.
All right. So final question from the YouTube chat is by George Conturas. And it's a bit of a more general question about analog modeling. Can you expand on the state of the art for analog modeling in 2020?
To be honest, I'm not the best person to talk about that. But again, if you want to to have some ideas on the state of the art, look at the academic papers coming from the DFX, from the well-known universities like Aalto University, like some very good also in UK, in Italy, and yeah.
Yeah. You got Queen Mary in London.
Yeah.
Goldsmiths in London, Urcam, of course. So, yeah, quite a few resources.
Yeah.
Right. So then I don't think we have any more questions at the moment. So thank you again so much, Kevin, for patiently answering all these questions. I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you again for inviting me. And yeah, that was the first time for me, and very, very interesting. And